I'm going to go over the first few questions that are on our photosynthesis review homework assignment and try to help you kind of conceptualize photosynthesis a little bit better. So let's start with number 1. Photosynthesis involves energy that originates from the blank and yields blank as a byproduct. So let's go to the slide that we have right in front of us, our very first one, and I see that photosynthesis involves energy that originates, well, the first energy that we have is definitely from the sun. So that would be your first blank, sunlight energy, and it yields, so what is the final product of it? Well, it's going to yield glucose and oxygen right here, but also we're going to have ATP. So there was many different things that we could talk about, but they wanted a byproduct. So it yields oxygen as a byproduct. But you could have said, glucose and ATP, those are actually not byproducts. Those are something that we really want for the plant itself. For us humans, oxygen. Okay, so that to us is not something to be minimalized. I'm skipping a few slides now just to show you the chemical equation. So we definitely yield a glucose molecule, and not just one, a couple of them, and also oxygen gas. And oxygen is just a byproduct in this reaction. The plant doesn't do anything with it except put it outside of itself as almost a waste product at this point. To answer question number 2, we jump a few more slides, which addresses some physics. The smallest unit of light is called a photon. So there's our photon word right there. And these oscillate. Oscillate means going back and forth, kind of like when you see a pendulum in a clock. So these oscillate, they actually go like this, up and down, wave type pattern. And each one of these photons here, it's on a path called a wavelength. So that zigzag form that I just drew down there. So that is our wavelength of light. Continuing this thought about wavelengths, when we change the wavelength, and on one side of the spectrum we have real tight zigzags, on the other side we have loose and kind of a wobbly look here, that's going to change the color actually. So number 3, the sun's light is emitted on a spectrum of wavelengths. So a spectrum meaning we have short ones on one side and we have medium ones in the middle, and then we have long ones at the end. So a full spectrum of differences. And that is an electromagnetic spectrum for number 3. Number 4, the photosynthetic organisms use small portions of the spectrum called the visible spectrum. So there's a lot of wavelengths we cannot see. So we can go way down into UVA and UVB on the left side of the chart past purple. And we can't see that, but we know it and we get sunburns from this. There's also wavelengths that are much longer than the red end of the spectrum here, and they're very loose and diffuse kind of noodles, and that frequency is what some of our TVs operate on or our radios operate on. So we don't really see those. We're only concerned with the visible spectrum for these plants. Number 5 asks us what helps photosynthetic organisms capture light. And the color of the pigment represents the colors of wavelength that is blank by the plant. So this one's something that we're going to get into a little bit more on the following slides, but photosystems that are used by these photosynthetic organisms, they capture the light. Now, time to put back on the physics hat for this one here to continue number 5 and answer the rest of it. Interestingly enough, when light hits a leaf, and let me draw a leaf right here, okay, there's going to be an awful lot of light, and if it's sunlight, it's going to come down and either it will bounce and shine off of the leaf and reflect, so that's reflection, or you might have sunlight that comes down and is absorbed into the leaf. And the reflected light gives the plant its color. So when we see green plants, it's because the light has actually bounced off of them. Here's our green right here. And the plant is actually not taking that green in. Instead, it's bouncing off of the leaf and away from it. So we are reflecting green. The colors that get absorbed into the plant that we then do not see for green plants, well, they're going to be your red, they're going to be your blue, because plants don't look green or blue typically. Okay, we see a lot of green plants instead, and that's because they're reflecting back green into our eyes. I kind of jumped the gun on number 6 here, but green plants are the ones that have chlorophyll A and B, and so I went ahead and put A and B in there because both of those can look green or yellow-green here, and those are the ones that are going to reflect green and yellow. They're going to absorb blue and violet, used for photosynthesis. Question number 7 talks about photosynthetic organisms and what they are called. And so photosynthetic organisms are autotrophs. So we definitely have an autotrophs word right in here, but they're a subset of the autotrophs. So they are photoautotrophs. That's the answer to number 7. And the chemical reactions of photosynthesis occur in, well, they're going to occur in the chloroplast. And if you want to get more specific, it's actually going to be in the mesophyll tissue that has the chloroplast within it. So this is the connection we make into the next slide here of what exactly is making food for them, what is making energy for them, and it's the chloroplast. Question number 8 asks about the 2 different reactions that are involved in photosynthesis, and they are the light-dependent reactions, and so that's converting light into chemical energy and producing oxygen. And then on the next slide, we're going to take those products and put them into the Calvin cycle. And so they're going to start building those sugar molecules from carbon dioxide. So what this is going to look like here is you have CO2, so a lot of carbon here, and we're eventually going to build a sugar molecule, and the most common one that we see is a glucose molecule. And so each one of these points right here is a carbon, 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 carbon. Usually there's an oxygen involved too and another carbon. So 6 carbons total, and each one of those originally came from carbon dioxide, a gas. Now number 9 addresses thylakoids, and thylakoids on the previous slide that we just saw showed that they were kind of these green stacks of coins that we do the light reaction in. And then the Calvin cycle here, it's showing it outside of the cell, kind of circulating back into those thylakoid, those stacks there. So the thylakoid contains part of the photosystems called photosystem 1 and photosystem 2 to make energy. So here's a better picture that kind of puts everything together. One chloroplast is the giant jelly bean that we're seeing, and inside of that chloroplast we have some thylakoids, some kind of look like pennies here, and each one of those has its own special membrane to it. And that's where we start using that membrane to kind of bounce electrons back and forth and photons and pass a lot of things up and down, and so that we can kind of build momentum on one side of a membrane or the other. Number 10 asks us about how do photons, how do they interact with this complex here. So molecules that absorb photons of light are called pigment complexes. And we see some of these pigments right down, let's see, I can search them. Antenna pigment molecules here. We have a photon that's hitting a pigment molecule here and exciting it. Following up, question number 11, absorbed light energy excites, and it's going to excite an electron. So here's your photon right here, exciting an electron. Then we have that's excited to a higher energy state. This energy is passed to a primary electron acceptor within the chlorophyll molecule. And we see that right over on the right hand side as the primary electron acceptor, and the excited energy going on right here, they make it look like a little kite. So excitement. So I think this slide answers number 11 just a little bit better. You have a photon coming in over on the left-hand side. It's coming down, exciting a piece of chlorophyll right here, or your pigment complex, and you are going to have excitement here captured by the primary electron acceptor. So that's 11. 12 is, what do you do with that electron now that you've captured it? Well, you pass it on to a protein on the thylakoid membrane.